Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 8, Episode 8, The Chicken Roaster. Hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing just the best you can do right now. I'm doing okay. I actually just posted to the socials that I'm recording this episode a bit late in the week. It's Friday morning. I try to even have it out by now, or at least I'd be in the end stages of editing and publishing at this point, but that didn't happen. I had full plans to do my usual Thursday routine, which would be I think a lot of podcasters would be like, why do you do this on such a tight timeline? But I do record usually on Thursday mornings and then spend the rest of the day and evening editing on and off until, it's time to publish. And again, I know this is super interesting and very exciting. I know you guys are just like rewinding it to be like, what? She's revealing all this juicy stuff. But anyway, it was just a late start this week. Yesterday, I had one of those days where I just was sluggish, mentally, emotionally. I just felt a little bit down. I had lunch with an old friend, a high school friend who now lives here in Colorado. We've literally known each other since we were 14. We met freshman year in high school. And she is a dear, dear friend. And we sort of went through a weird year last year where we didn't talk for a while and we didn't see each other. And it was for no good reason. And I think both of us thought the other was mad at mad at the other. Like, it was just one of those dumb miscommunication type things. And also this friend has been going through just, oh my gosh, after we talked about, and after we caught up on our year last year and what we've been going through individually, I was just like, oh my gosh, don't even feel bad about not reaching out because you've had a lot to deal with. So at any rate, it was an emotional lunch and we poured our hearts out and it was really good in the end, but it was also, very emotional. And by the end of that, I was exhausted. Also had a pounding headache, which is always fun. And I was like, you know what? Instead of barreling through and recording and trying to get it out on time, the podcast, I am going to lay on the couch with my son and watch some basketball, which is what I did. Speaking of basketball, we were able to go to the Nuggets game, the Denver Nuggets game this past Monday, which was the game where they eliminated the Lakers to move on to the second round of the playoffs. And oh my gosh, it was so fun. We had nosebleeds. We had literally the second to the last row in the arena. And it didn't matter. It was so much fun just to be in the building. I was really actually pleasantly surprised at how well we could see the game. You just feel like, you're so far back. It's like hard to see. Not at all. It was just as exciting. And we were surrounded by really great fans. And even my daughter, who's not the biggest basketball fan, she had a lot of fun. She just kind of enjoys the experience, which I so appreciate, especially for a 13-year-old. She could easily be like whiny about it, but that's not her. I was about to say that's not her yet. For all of you parents of teenagers, I don't know if you guys are going through this, but like I have a new teenager. So she turned 13 last October. Now, I am waiting for that other shoe to drop where she just turns into a monster, because that's what you hear. And that's what's portrayed sort of out in the media, and every sitcom or drama you watch. Every teenager is a fucking asshole. And I don't know if one feeds the other, but I do think it does. I think stereotypes and certainly, things portrayed in the media and things portrayed in shows and movies, I think that does sometimes inform how teenagers think they should behave. That's a whole other tangent. So I'm not going to bore you with that. I've already bored you with my podcast scheduling routine. So I'm not going to get into this. But anyway, I was just really pleasantly surprised I shouldn't even say that. No, I wasn't surprised because she's got such a great attitude. So my daughter enjoyed the game as well. That's the whole point of this fucking rambling. Sorry. My husband was out of town, so it was just me and the kids. And man, yeah, it was super, super fun. A little rowdy after the game, after we won. a lot of chants on the way out. Who's your daddy was a big chant. It was in the arena as well, but I didn't really understand what people were saying. But yeah, basically, I think it's really directed to LeBron James because, man, do people love to hate LeBron James. I don't hate him. I do think he's a flopper and I do think he's a crybaby, but I don't hate him. I recognize his legendary status. But yeah, there was a "Who's your daddy" chant on the way out. There was a "Fuck your Lakers" because there were Laker fans also there at Ball Arena. And so basically it was all in good fun. There were, no one was getting upset, but the Laker fans with their Laker jerseys on, people would start chanting "Fuck your Lakers" to them. And so I'm just like, can we get out of here? My kids have heard every swear word from their parents. So it's not a big deal. It's not like it was shocking in that regard, but it was also just like very slow going to get back to the car and get home. Kind of a late night on a school night, but totally, totally worth it. So that was really fun. And then real quick, this is not in my notes. I'm just going to mention it. I just get used to me always talking about Julia Louis-Dreyfus's podcast. So I've been listening to the Patti Smith episode this week. Admittedly, I'm not really knowledgeable about Patti Smith, but I will, like I've said before, I will listen to any episode no matter how well I know the guest, because JLD is an amazing interviewer and I always end up feeling wiser. It's a very effective podcast, very well titled. But anyway, holy shit, Patti Smith is a fucking badass. I know I'm late to this party. I'm sure many of you out there are going like, yeah, no duh, idiot. And if you're saying no duh, that means you're old like me. So anyway, I'm not done with the episode yet. I was just listening to it this morning as I was kind of getting stuff done around the house and prepping to record. And I've already cried twice after my emotional day yesterday. But sometimes tears are very much worth it. There's my bit of wisdom for you. And with that, I really don't know what a better transition is from a nugget of wisdom, a Denver nugget of wisdom leading into a Seinfeld episode, really. I mean, that's just so smooth. It's so logical. Now I'm going to talk about a neon sign that ruins the lives of a couple men. So the synopsis for the chicken roaster is as follows. Newman gets Kramer hooked on Kenny Rogers Roaster's chicken. The chicken shop's neon sign is keeping Kramer awake, so he arranges an apartment swap with Jerry, causing the two men to swap personalities as well. George tries to make an impression on a woman he likes by coordinating several apparently coincidental accidents, but it ends up costing him an $8,000 hat. Jerry's insistence on having a college friend meet him for lunch ends up getting the guy fired. Elaine's personal purchases on J Peterman's research account gets her audited by the company accountant. This episode was written by Alec Berg and Jeff Schaefer. So our cold open is at a fruit stand. George is appalled by the price of the merchandise. He says, why is there no haggling in this country? He thinks everything should be negotiable and that all starches are a scam. Jerry agrees, especially ZD with that big hole. That line always makes me laugh. The shop owner comes out and George tries his haggling and the guy gets pissed off immediately and bans George from coming back. And Jerry's like, well, how about we leave and come back in a week? Deal, the guy says and exits. And George is satisfied. Yeah, we got something there. What is with them always pissing off fruit vendors? First it was Joe and now this guy? That's just funny to me. All right, next we are on the street. Jerry and Kramer are walking and they notice the Kenny Rogers Roasters is finally opening. And Jerry points out the giant neon chicken on the roof. Kramer doubts that he can sell any chicken. There are chicken places all over here. Well, he is the gambler, Jerry says. Kramer has to leave and help Newman pick out a turtle, and so he exits. Jerry then runs into a friend from college named Seth. He's like, it's been at least 5 years. Jerry asks him if he wants to grab some lunch. He says, well, I'm on my way to a big meeting for work. Oh, come on, Jerry says, blow it off, like they always used to do with poli-sci in college. Seth finally gives in and they start walking together. Jerry asks about their friend Moochie. He's dead. Is that right? All right, next we're at Barney's. We got a Benestanza scene. Hello. George asks Elaine how she can consider the lunch they just had a work expense. And she says, "What do you think about the catalog?" "It stinks." "All right, there, we just discussed business." A saleswoman comes in and tells Elaine that they have the down comforter that she wanted and the cookware that she liked. Elaine tells her that she will take it and to charge the Peterman account with the other stuff. The saleswoman's like, "You know what else you might like?" And Elaine doesn't even have to hear it. She says, "I'll take it." George puts on a huge fur hat and asks Elaine if she likes it. Elaine kind of laughs, but then the saleswoman says she thinks it looks very nice on him. He looks at her. "Really?" "Elaine? Peterman account?" "Why not?" Elaine says. "And some hair for my little friend here." The actress in this scene who plays the saleswoman is Kimberly Khalil. Her name is Heather in the episode. And there aren't any recent credits to her name, but she had also appeared in Jerry Maguire, Party of Five, and King of Queens. And some trivia that I thought was interesting. She's married to actor William Fichtner. They've been married since 1998, and he's one of those character actors you definitely know by face, but maybe not by his name. He's appeared in Crash, Armageddon, Contact, The Dark Knight. I remember him from Contact and The Dark Knight. I love the movie Contact, by the way. Highly recommend to all of you. Anyway, back to Kimberly. She's not defined by her husband, but I just love that trivia. I really like her as Heather. She definitely has that Marissa Tomei thing that George mentions later. She's very charming. This is definitely a more rounded out character for a love interest in this show. So I love that. And I think she does a really great job acting against JLD and Jason Alexander. She's really funny. And then my take on the scene, so often we see George and Elaine in some sort of like snarky conversation or battling each other. And that's a lot of why Benestanza is so entertaining. But I also very much enjoy these types of calmer interactions that contain really no venom. There's little moments here and there. She kind of rolls her eyes at George, but I love that they can have these moments as well. And it's super entertaining. And I also enjoy that Jerry and Kramer are not in this scene and that George and Elaine get together without them. Remember early episodes where they made a whole plot where Jerry had needed to be there with them. Like George and Elaine had a super awkward night because Jerry couldn't make it because that dog Farfel, that's what it was. But anyway, so I love that we've seen the evolution of that and that, yeah, George and Elaine get together on their own. I just love that so much. Also, I find it funny that Elaine takes no offense to George saying the catalog stinks. You know, this could easily be something where she would get pissed and insult him back or something, but she never denies that her job is somewhat silly and the catalog is ridiculous. So I like that moment a lot. And we're seeing Elaine drunk on power here, spending all this money, which will, of course, have some consequences. So I think this is a really fun plot for Elaine. And ending the scene with a jab at George is great. Some hair for my little friend here. I don't think she ever passes up the opportunity to make fun of George. All right, next we are at a restaurant. Jerry and Seth are eating and chatting. Jerry talks about his almost show in Japan, and he's not sure if he would have done it in Japan, but in English. During this conversation, Jerry learns that Seth works for a big investment firm and that he blew off their big acquisition meeting with Citibank. Wasn't that kind of a big deal? And then Seth kind of realizes, yeah, and he's regretting his decision. All right, next we see this phone conversation. Elaine and Jerry are on the phone. She's telling him about all the purchases she made and mentions a water pick. You use a water pick? She says, yeah, water pick, floss, plaques, brush, Listerine. Jerry makes fun and says that she takes about 3 hours in the bathroom before bed, and she really doesn't deny it. She's like, oh, at the very least. She tells him to hang on. She has another call, and it's from a Peterman accountant, Roger Ipswich. He tells her he's noticed all the purchases on the Peterman account. Well, I am the president, she says smugly. Yes, and we're all very impressed. Nevertheless, he reminds her that the expense account is meant only for business purposes. Well, isn't the president allowed to do anything they want? He says sternly, no. He tells her he will be in her office first thing tomorrow. Good day. Ooh, Elaine's nervous now. Good day. She hangs up, leaving Jerry wondering if anyone is on the line. This is a fun scene. I love the double and eventually triple shot of the phone calls, especially if you watch Jerry while Elaine's on the phone with Ipswich. He's just yawning and waiting around. And so here we have the meat of Elaine's plot introduced, getting in trouble for all this shopping. And come on, Elaine. I want to say Elaine should be smarter, but this is really funny too. That I think she's trying to be like a man here. You know, she's like, whatever, men do this shit all the time, which she's not wrong about, but she's falling victim to letting all of this get to her head. And that's something I think that's pretty common. You never know how people will change once they get some power. And for Elaine, apparently it's trying to bilk the money from a company into paying for her luxury items. So Elaine's really no better than anyone else. All right, next we're in Monk's. George is wearing his new fur hat and he enters Monk's. Tells Jerry that it just bottles up all the heat. He doesn't even need to wear a coat. He says he also has a date with a saleswoman. She has a little Marissa Tomei thing going on. Jerry says, well, too bad you got a little George Costanza thing going on. He tells Jerry that their date is going to be just running errands with her. Jerry's like, that's a date? You know how I work, George says. I'm like a commercial jingle. First, it's a little annoying. Then you hear it a few times. You're humming it. You're singing it in the shower. And by the third date, it's bye, Menon. Jerry asks, well, how do you know you'll get to go out with her again? Well, if there's any doubt, George says he does a leave behind. When he goes back to get his item, boom, another date. Jerry's like, that is so old. Why didn't you just show up with a wooden horse? I have no idea what that means, by the way, and there was no explanation in the extras. Next, we're in Jerry's hallway. He's singing to himself, bye, Menon. Now, of course, this is a reference to what young people would have no idea about, but it was so funny. I remember laughing so hard because, I mean, it was in every commercial for a Menon product. Bye, Menon. It's a big part of my childhood, as pathetic as that might sound. Jerry's about to open his door when he notices a red light streaming through Kramer's peephole. He knocks on Kramer's door, and when Kramer opens his door, a flood of red light blares onto Jerry. He's like, what is that? Kramer's like, what? Oh, it's a roaster's sign. It's right across from my window. Why did you shut the shades? They are shut, he says. Kramer tells him that his friend Seth stopped by. Oh, yeah, what did he have to say? Yeah, he was fired. All right, next we're in Elaine's office, and she is spinning all of her purchases for Ipswich as business purposes, wearing the down comforter around her body, and says it's the Aristotle goose down tunic. Another bullseye, he says. She starts watering her plants with the water pick. So it all seems to be working. He seems to be, I guess, buying it. But then he does ask to see the sable hat that she purchased. She asks why. Because it cost $8,000. Well, Elaine didn't know that. She freaks out and starts spraying him with the water pick and can't seem to turn it off. My take on this scene, just fantastic physical comedy. When she is spraying Ipswich with the water pick and trying to turn it off. I mean, it's so believable and it's such an unbelievable thing. Like there's a switch right there, right? But like she's so kind of shocked by the $8,000 and she's fallen over because it's stupid ass down comforter wrapped around her. It's all gold, all well done. So believable by JLD. And I love when JLD gets to show that off. She's such a brilliant physical comic. And this is a fun scene overall. Ipswich is also really funny. That deadpan delivery is so great. I love another bullseye. And here we learned something else about Elaine. Clearly, she has no regard for spending all this cash and doing the risky move of charging it to the Peterman account. But apparently she doesn't look at any price tags. I believe this is how MC Hammer and Toni Braxton lost all their money as well. Like, come on, Elaine. Next, we are in Jerry's apartment. Seth is there, and Jerry's like, why did you go to lunch with me if that meeting was so important? We're old college buddies. I only knew you through Moochie. He tells Jerry not to worry about it, and he's happy that they caught up. That's the important part. As he's about to exit, he asks if he can take the want ads from Jerry's newspaper, but Jerry says no because he hasn't read Take McNamara yet. That is so funny to me. Oh my God. Like, it's the perfect comment. If you would have said Garfield, not as funny. Tank McNamara is so hilarious to me. So I Again, aging myself. I don't give a shit. I'm 40 fucking 5. Whatever. I I loved the comics in the newspaper. That was pretty much the only part of the newspaper I read. Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't a super informed kid, but newspapers were just a staple in households back then. And I would read them every day, just in the regular weekday papers. But then, of course, the Sunday paper was when there was the big insert and it was all the comics were in color. Oh my gosh, I loved it. My favorite comic was Luann. Of course, the classics like Garfield, Charlie Brown. I would read those. I'm like imagining it in my head. I also remember there was it the Doonesbury's, that married couple? Anyway, I do remember, I never read Tank McNamara because it just didn't speak to me. I want to say it was about something in the army. I don't know. I should have researched it, but I don't care enough. But anyway, that part always makes me laugh because it's just like, I haven't read Tank McNamara yet. It's just, I can't, that's all I can say is just, it really tickled me because I could relate to reading the comics in a newspaper. Kramer enters as Seth exits, and we can see the red light and hear the buzz from the neon sign coming from his apartment. How's life on the red planet? Oh, Kramer says it's killing him. It's burning his brain. And that he tried to complain to the shop, but they just gave him the old heave-ho. And he's telling Jerry this while pouring tomato juice into cereal. He takes a bite and spits it out. He says that the red juice looked like milk to him. His rods and cones are all screwed up. He tells Jerry he's got to move in with him while making a huge mess, spilling the bowl of cereal and trying to clean it up. It's so well done. Just how, I love that we're hearing what Kramer's saying about moving in with Jerry, who has been established and every fan or everyone watching knows Jerry's very fastidious. He's a neat freak. But the way Kramer is spilling and then trying to clean, it's just like, oh my God, what a nightmare. And then he suggests, hey, why don't they switch apartments since Jerry is a heavy sleeper? Or I could sleep in the park, Jerry says. Maybe knock down the walls and make it into a big suite. And Kramer doesn't get the joke. He's like, these are load-bearing walls. They're not coming down. So Kramer has to think of another idea. He's going to drive that place out of business. How are you going to do that? Like we did in the 60s, taking it to the streets. He opens the door to exit, and we get that iconic moment of Kramer leaning back, almost like 90 degrees back as the red light shines on him. Oh, what a fantastic moment. All right, next we are in Heather's apartment. Heather and George enter from their date. He's wearing the hat and carrying all of her bags, and we haven't seen why, but she is ready for this date to be over. She's really irritated with him, and he asks if, they want to get together tomorrow. She says, no, I'm going to be pretty busy. Well, what about this weekend? I'm going to be pretty busy for a while, she says. George tries his leave behind and tosses his keys down and tries to leave. She catches him. You forgot your keys. Well, he denies it. She says, they're not mine. Oh, he grabs them and he's trying to think of something else while she answers a phone call. She's like, bye, George. He's like, yeah, bye. She notices him lingering. George, bye. And then she turns away from him and starts talking on the phone. You will not believe the date I just had. He puts his sable hat under the chair pillow and sneaks out singing Costanza. All right, next we're in Elaine's office. Elaine is berating George about the hat. She needs it back. He's like, relax, I left it at Heather's place. And he's also distracted by the butterflies on her wall, pounding them. Are these real? No, dead. He tells her to calm down. He will call Heather about the hat, and that way he will get another date. Watch the magic. Then he puts her phone on speaker and tries to dial, and it's not working. Dial 9, Merlin, she says. Heather answers and is audibly disappointed when she hears it's George. Ugh. And says that there's no hat here. And he's like, no, I'm quite sure I left it on the chair behind the pillow accidentally. Nope, she says, no hat, and hangs up. And Elaine glares at George. My take on this scene, so much Benestanza in this episode. I just have to acknowledge that. And when it's Benestanza working on a problem together, that's even better. George's confusion about the butterfly art always gets me, and it's super funny to me. I did see in the extras that was a decision made on rehearsal day. And the way Elaine says, dial 9, Merlin, I love that. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with this, This was a way to call out in an office. If you had an office network of phones, the point was that you could do inter-office calls just by an extension. So if you needed to get an outside line, you always had to dial 9. And that must have been a universal number. I remember this back when I was in my corporate life and working in an office. It was always 9. So I don't know who made that decision, but the dial 9 Merlin joke is just as relatable to me as Tank McNamara. So we also see the story progress here. Heather wants nothing to do with George. That ugh on the phone is so great. And I have to say, Jason Alexander is so hilarious. I love this smug George performance, how proud he is that he literally annoys women into liking him. He's so proud, and it's so enjoyable. All right, next we are on the street outside of Kenny Rogers Roasters. Seth is taking out the trash in a Roasters uniform, and Jerry approaches and he's so shocked. Apparently this is Seth's new gig. He's the manager here, he tells Jerry. But you were an executive. This is fast food. Oh, Seth gets a little offended. It's not fast food. It's good food quickly. And he seems pretty happy there. We hear Kramer yelling in the background. Jerry and Seth look up and see Kramer hanging a sheet out his window with an arrow pointing down that says bad chicken. And he's yelling how the chicken will mess you up. And Seth says, that's not going to be good for business. That's not going to be good for anybody, Jerry says. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer and Jerry have switched apartments. Kramer is happy, but Jerry is just creeped out, especially by Mr. Marbles, the ventriloquist dummy. And Kramer assures him he's harmless. Also, Jerry does not want Newman using his, and then we hear a toilet flush, and out comes Newman with a newspaper under his arm, fresh from dumping, obviously, disgusting. Compliments Kramer on his new place. And Jerry's like, well, don't get too comfortable. As soon as Seth gets a real job, you two are back in that chicken supernova. And he puts on a pair of cataract sunglasses and exits. Kramer realizes that the food that Newman brought over is Kenny Rogers Roasters. He says, get that out of here. Nope. Newman says that the man makes a mean bird. And he starts eating it so passionately. There's no other way to say it. And it really starts to tempt Kramer. Oh, what is that, hickory? Yeah. It's the wood that makes it good. Kramer reaches for a piece and Newman snaps at him like a dog. Oh, stop it. Kramer tries the chicken and says, Next, we're in Heather's apartment. She answers the door and Elaine is standing there. She says, can I help you? Elaine introduces herself and reminds her that they met at Barney's. I'm a friend of George Costanza's, and she pulls George into view by his ear. Elaine explains George's pathetic plan of leaving something behind in order to get another date. Heather's like, really? I know, Elaine says, sympathizing. He has a real confidence problem. Well, I don't really, George tries to explain. George, Elaine interrupts him. Elaine continues, saying how she knows Heather said she didn't have the hat because she didn't want to see George again. And more sympathetic, I could not be. But that she really needs the hat back. Heather says she really doesn't have the hat. Maybe the maid took it. I had people over. Oh, that makes sense, George says as he tries to leave. Elaine grabs him back by the ear and asks, could we have a look around? Heather's like, yeah, be my guest. George is like, it's nice to see you again. Again, being dragged by the ear. And then we cut to them walking out of Heather's place. She slams the door after them, and Elaine is distraught because they didn't find the hat. I don't know what I'm going to do. George thinks, she's bluffing, and then presents a clock from under his jacket. You stole her clock? He is so proud. And she mocks him by saying, well done. This is one for us, Elaine. My take on this scene, I just feel spoiled, honestly, with all this Benestanza-ness. It's just delicious. Super fun scene. I so enjoy how Elaine and Heather bond over how pathetic George is. They just kind of have this moment. They're like, I know, he's an idiot. I do believe Heather here, though. I think maybe the maid or a friend did take the hat. I don't think she's withholding the hat at all. And side note, she has a really nice place and can afford a maid, and she works at Barney's. Like, how much does Barney's pay? I mean, I'm sure she works on commission, but that stood out to me. She's like, maybe the maid took it. I'm like, you have a fucking maid? You live in New York City. And this is just a great JLD performance in the scene. Such fantastic writing for her. I love when Elaine is so professionally insulting. Like the tone, she's just like, I know. Like it's almost like she's presenting to a room of executives when she's talking about how pathetic George is. And the way she belittles George, it's never disappointing. It's always entertaining. So we see a journey of the Benestanza here, right? Like I said in the first scene, they're so just congenial and they just had lunch. He insults the catalog, but she's like, yeah, whatever. They're having a good time together. And then now in this scene, she has him by the ear and she's calling him pathetic. Next, we are in Jerry's apartment and Kramer's apartment. Kramer is in Jerry's bed going to town, eating tons of Kenny Rogers Roaster's chicken. Super messy, wiping his hands and mouth on Jerry's sheets. It's so gross. I'm like, come on, Kramer. I don't even think Kramer could do that, but whatever. It's a good effect. Now, meanwhile, Jerry is in Kramer's place. Jerry is in bed, unable to sleep. He's super scared of everything in there, the sounds, especially the sounds of footsteps across the room. Is someone there? Mr. Marbles? All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Elaine's there talking to Kramer, and she's like, I told Ipswich I'd have the hat back by this afternoon. What am I going to do? Kramer suggests sleeping with him. Jerry enters, Kramer style, just busting in, says, hey, buddy. He says he's on no sleep. All night long, things are creaking and cracking, and that red light is burning my brain. Elaine tells him that he looks a little stressed. Oh, I'm stressed, he says. He goes to the fridge to get some ice cream, and Elaine asks Kramer again, what should she do? If I don't have this hat by 4, they're going to take me down like Nixon. Jerry interjects and talks about his friend Bob Sacamano. I thought he was Kramer's friend. Well, he called about 3 a.m. and we got to talking. Apparently he sells Russian hats down in Battery Park. $40. Are they sable? No, but the difference is negligible, he says. I can barely get that out. Kramer's like, oh yeah, I like this idea. Elaine's like, all right, let's give it a shot. Let's go. Giddy up, Jerry says. They exit. After they're gone, Newman comes in from the back saying that the food is getting cold. And he's not sure why they have to hide it from Jerry. And Kramer explains, if Jerry knows that I'm hooked on Roger's chicken, I'm back in there with the Red Menace. My take on this scene, oh, what a classic scene. This is where Jerry and Kramer have switched personalities from living in each other's apartments. And just, I have to say it, shout out to Jerry Seinfeld. What a fantastic performance. This impression of Kramer in the inside look for the episode. It's pretty amazing. Jerry Seinfeld talks about how he was super nervous to do this scene. He doesn't do impressions. He's like, first of all, I'm not a great actor. And it's like, I don't do impressions. So he really wasn't sure if he could pull it off. But yeah, first take, that's the take you see. And he did it. So I thought that was pretty amazing. And I wanted to acknowledge that. JLD doesn't get much here. You know, she's just so stressed. And we need to get the information that she has this urgency to get the hat back or she's going to get fired. Next, we're in Elaine's office. Ipswich informs her that the hat she brought in isn't sable. It's nutria. Yeah, well, that's a kind of sable. No, he corrects her. It's a type of rat. That's a rat hat? Yes, he says, and a quite poorly made one. He says he has no choice but to recommend her prompt termination to the board, and that nothing short of Peterman himself can stop it. But he's in the Burmese jungle. Yes, Ipswich confirms, and quite mad from what I hear. Elaine tries one last thing. Can I fire you? No, he says and exits. My take, JLD's line read of that, yeah, it's a kind of sable, gets me every time. The halted speech, her eyes darting around. It's just, this is, oh God, it's like the bread and butter of what I love about JLD. She's so great at that awkwardness. Oh, it's the funniest she's been all episode, in my opinion. And now in her plot, we know that she's screwed unless she gets to Peterman. And I also love how she asks Ipswich if she could fire him. It's like this unsure and apologetic, like, can I fire you? It's just a great performance all around. Next, we're at Monk's. George and Kramer are at a booth, and apparently Heather called and left a message and told George to call her if he had the time. If I had the time. You get it? Kramer doesn't, but this is all very exciting. She knows I have her clock. I know she has the hat. I think she's getting ready to make an exchange. Or it's possible that you're out of your mind. I've considered that, George says. It's unlikely. I'd look again, Kramer says. Then Kramer asks him, why didn't you come to Jerry about all this? George says ever since he moved into that apartment, he's too much like, well, you. Oh, that's a shame, Kramer says. Next, we're at Kenny Rogers Roasters, and Jerry is pleading with Seth to turn off the sign. Well, Seth doesn't have that power because he lied before. He's only the assistant manager. He calls out order number 67, Family Feast. Newman excitedly goes up to the counter. Number 67. Hello, Newman. Hello, Jerry. Seth says not to forget his steamed broccoli. Hold it. Jerry smells something fishy. Says how Newman would never eat broccoli, even if it was deep fried in chocolate sauce. Newman tries to say he loves it. Jerry makes him prove it by eating a piece. But that breaks Newman. He can't do it. Spits it out. Vile weed. And Jerry knows it's Kramer that's hooked on the chicken. Yes, yes, Newman confirms. Now, please, I need mustard. He takes a shot of mustard and composes himself. Next, we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer is sitting at the table waiting for Newman. When Jerry walks in, he says, Newman, what took you so... Oh, Jerry, hey. Expecting Newman? That's funny because I just saw him at Kenny Rogers Roasters. Oh, boy, I hate that place. Yeah, he had quite a load of chicken, Jerry says. Kramer tries to change the subject, says that Elaine stopped by and dropped off the Bob Sacamano hat. Ooh, she's upset with him. Yes, sirree. Anyway, it was good to see you. But Jerry doesn't leave. He says how much he misses his apartment. Maybe I'll move back. No, you don't want to do that. Kramer points out that he'll have to put that sign back up. I don't think he will. And finally, Jerry cracks Kramer by threatening to put the sign up himself. Kramer screams how much he loves that chicken. And he's got a big problem, Jerry. Next, we're in Burma. Myanmar, Burma. A boy is leading Elaine into a small room in the jungle. It looks like a temple. And he tells her to kneel here. And there's Peterman. And we hear a hacking sound and the young boy is cutting a pineapple, which apparently is a callback to when Peterman's kind of having his meltdown at the office. He's like, where's my pineapple? Peterman starts yelling at the boy to leave. Oh, you speak Burmese? No, Elaine, that was gibberish. Did you have any trouble finding the place? She says, no. You're the only white poet warlord in the neighborhood. Are you an assassin? He asks. She's like, no, I work for your mail order catalog. He says, an errand girl sent by grocery clerks to collect a bill. She's like, well, actually, I do have a bill here. If you could just sign this expense form, I might be able to make the last fan boat out of here. Oh, I'd be happy to, Elaine. He looks at it and says, but I will have to see this hat. My take on this scene, it's a fun scene. I love the lengths Elaine will go to keep her job. And John O'Hurley is funny here. Apparently, this is a spoof on Apocalypse Now, Marlon Brando. I never saw it. But it's a fun wrap-up to Elaine's plot, and that he does want to see the hat. I mean, it's an $8,000 hat. I don't care how long you've been in the Burmese jungle. You're going to wonder about that, so I can't blame Peterman. All right, next we're in the park. George is meeting Heather. They sit on a park bench. George has his paper bag with him. He asks her, how do you want to do this? She confesses how when they first met, she found him very irritating, but how he's sort of grown on her. And she sings, Costanza. So you really don't have my hat? Huh? She says. He moves his paper bag to the other side and suggests, well, why don't we go do something? She's like, what's in the bag? It's a sandwich. Well, then the clock alarm starts ringing. Damn salami. She grabs it and finds her clock. You stole my clock? George tries to blame it on the deli, but she walks away and we see lightning and we hear thunder. Next, we're at Kenny Rogers Roasters. Jerry enters from the pouring rain wearing the rat hat. He greets Seth. It's really coming down out there. He starts shaking the water off the hat, but all the rat fur starts flying into people's food. Oh, gross. That's not going to be good for business. That's not going to be good for anybody, Seth says. We see Kramer bathed in red light in his bedroom, eating chicken and just pounds of it. Then all of a sudden, the red light is turned off. Kramer looks up with a mouthful of chicken. Kenny? Kenny! There's a tag to the episode. There's a few scenes. We first see Kramer with a sign outside of his window saying, Kenny, come back. Then we see Jerry glad to be back in his own bed, but then we see a shadow of Mr. Marbles going by, scaring him. And then back to Burma, Elaine is showing Peterman the last catalog cover with the urban sombrero. And he takes one look and says, "The horror. The horror." My take on the tag, it's fine. It's amusing to see Elaine's mistake of the urban sombrero continue to horrify people, especially the founder of the company. But maybe if she told him that the urban sombrero was hurting the umbrella vendors, he'd feel better. We just saw that in the last episode. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Is your nighttime routine taking too long? Do you get to bed way too late because you practice good hygiene? My nightly wind down is a must for me to sleep more soundly. But by the time I've taken care of my face, hair, teeth, gums, nails, knees, and elbows, it's been almost 3 hours. If only there was something that could save time. Introducing the Brotisserie, a revolutionary device that allows you to multitask your hygiene routine so you can get to bed within minutes. Made by NASA scientists and big fans of the Jetsons, the Brotisserie combines body and rotisserie, and it rotates your naked body slowly as various soap, salves, brushes, and water shoot at your parts at high speeds. Just climb into the small tube, affix yourself to the rod, and let the Brotisserie do the rest. After I knocked down some walls and completely soundproofed my bathroom, the Brotisserie changed my life. In good ways, mostly. The bad ways is that I'll be paying for it until I'm 92. But you know what? I'm going to have a lot of time to get a second job thanks to the Brotisserie. The Brotisserie only requires 400 square feet of space and 12 separate water and electric and gas hookups. You can use any hygienic products of your choice, provided they have the correct viscosity to flow through the Brotisserie's complex set of pipes and tubes. You know what? You're probably better off subscribing to this special Brotisserie line of products from the website for only $419.99 a month. If you're wondering if the Brotisserie is friendly to the environment, well, stop wondering. It is not, but it does allow you more time to figure out how to help climate change in other ways. You're welcome. Order your Brotisserie today at www.powerwashingmyass.bro. For a limited time, our male customers will be invited to test our new hygiene machine, the Mantisserie, a version that has all the functions of the Brotisserie, but with an added facial shave feature. It's a bit dicey, so that's why we need men to help us figure out how sharp the blades should be. All participants must sign a liability waiver. The Brotisserie, because I think we can all agree robots will eventually take over. And we're back. So there were really no extras of note. So I'm going to move on to a comment by one of our friends of the podcast, Kenny. It's so fitting that our friend Kenny is commenting on the Kenny Rogers Roasters episode. He says, "The chicken roaster is my all-time favorite Seinfeld episode. How could it not be when it ends with Kramer repeatedly calling my name?" The Jerry Kramer role reversal is phenomenal. Call me when you have the time. And Newman's shot of honey mustard is hilarious. Lainey pulling George's ear and spraying the guy with the water pick makes this episode a masterpiece. I will say, I do think there's a little bit of a Kenny bias here, Kenny, but I don't blame you. It's not like you're propping up an episode that has your name in it that's not very good. This episode is so solid, and you're right, so many amazing moments, so many classic and iconic moments that have made it into all sorts of montages for Seinfeld. So completely agree. And yeah, I mean, I think your alarm should be just the ripped audio of him going, "Kenny! Kenny!" Thanks, Kenny, for sending that in. And now it's time to move on to Greg's Sack Lunch. Every week, Greg sends in a sack full of his thoughts about the episode, and this is what he had to say about the chicken roaster. He says, okay, now this is a good episode. We get some Benestanza, which always makes for a great plot, but we also get a Jerry and Kramer role reversal, which is one of the most memorable for those two of the series. I really like this episode because a lot happens, and it's all pretty funny for all four. Completely agree. You know, sometimes when they're trying to juggle all these plots with the main four, you can definitely argue some. It's like, oh, this one's okay, but this one's way better. But yeah, I agree. This is all pretty balanced. Next in his sack, I find his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. Greg says, there are so many good Elaine moments that I have a hard time picking a favorite. I love when she's at the store with George at the beginning, spending money like crazy, and gets the hat for George with a little dig attached about his baldness with, and some hair for my little friend here. George doesn't care. He just got some attention from the saleswoman and he's getting something for free. So he's not going to retaliate. That's a great point. Yeah, I think he would normally be insulted, but you're absolutely right, Greg. Cute girl just gave him a compliment and a little smile. And yeah, he's getting a sweet ass fur hat for free. I mean, those are really the two things that make George click, right? Women and cheapness. Greg goes on to say, I also love the moment where the company accountant calls Elaine while she's on the call with Jerry, and she says how she's the president, and the accountant is like, and we're all glad. She knows that wasn't sincere. And the follow-up of Jerry saying hello after he's been forgotten about on the other line cracks me up. Oh, I know. I just love the cleverness of that scene, that triple shot. And yeah, like Jerry just sitting there picking at his shirt, yawning. So funny. And you're right. That little... when he's like, yeah, we're all very impressed. And like her little furrow of the brow, she's like, wait, what? I don't think he meant that. Next, Greg says, when Elaine is with George at Heather's door, that is a great instance of Elaine just shitting on George. She needs to get the hat and will say what she needs to, and all the while George just has to take it. Her line, more sympathetic I could not be, is just so perfectly written and delivered. Also, did you see how smoothly she grabbed George's ear without even looking? That was remarkable. Holy shit, I didn't even mention that. But yes, I've always noticed that. Like, how does she do that so well? It's so fantastic. If you guys watch it again, it is just arm out, back in right away with that ear just like firmly planted between her fingers. And yeah, the more sympathetic I could not be. That's kind of what I mean when she's like, she's got her professional voice on and she's literally like professionally dragging George. And that just makes it that much more enjoyable, that much more delicious. All right, Greg has also included a scene swap idea in his sack. He says, because I would love more of George and Elaine, everything else becomes secondary. I like the Kenny Rogers stuff, but a lot of time is spent with Seth and with Newman, and I didn't need that to be as much of the time. Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I feel spoiled because I think we do get a lot of Benestanza. Would I say no to more Benestanza? Absolutely not. But I think I do. I do like the Kenny Rogers thing. I think it's clever how they put those stakes on there with Seth now working. I will say it's a little hamstrung. It's like, okay, this guy comes out of nowhere. Why does Jerry feel so guilty about this guy losing his job? Like, he's the one that made the dumbass decision. Like, Jerry didn't have to cajole him that much. But all that being said, whatever. This is the device they used so that Jerry had something at stake for Kenny Rogers to stay open. I will agree with you though. Like it's not as strong, but I'm still really entertained by that entire plot. I like, if for nothing else, I like seeing that role reversal. I love seeing Kramer just going to town on chicken for some reason. That makes me laugh. So it's all still really good stuff. But yeah, would I take more Benestanza? In a heartbeat. Greg also says, I also don't love the whole end for Elaine in Burma visiting Peterman. I know this is a spoof of Apocalypse Now, but I've never seen that movie. We're in the same boat, Greg. That said, I do think there needed to be something to close out the story, so this works as well as anything. How much money did Elaine spend to go to Burma? Could she not have just bought another hat, showed it to the accountant, and then returned it? That's a good point. That would have been the easy way out. Yeah, that's like, what if they had cell phones in Home Alone? It's a very easy solution. But of course, we need some grand gesture to make it more funny and to see Elaine looking really cute in her little safari outfit. I love that too. I bet it was all Peterman. Oh, I did want to mention, what am I saying? I did totally forget about this. Shoot. There was an extra that was worthy of mentioning. Totally slipped in my mind. It was a deleted scene. So we see Elaine at this payphone. I think it's the same payphone that we see Peterman calling her from when he's like, I'm in Burma. And she's on the phone trying to find, is there any Peterman listed? So she's getting frustrated. And so she gets off the phone. She's standing there like not knowing how to find him. And then she sees a Burmese person walk by and she's like, they're wearing the whatever, blah, 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 something from Peterman. Another person walks by. She's like, that's the gentleman's duster or whatever. And so she follows them to find Peterman. So I thought that was actually pretty funny. She follows the clothes to find Mr. Peterman in his little cave. And finally, in Greg's sack are his extra thoughts. He says, watching Newman and Kramer eat that chicken disgusted me. Also, when Kramer spills the cereal with the tomato juice into the fridge crevice, my OCD can't take it. Disgusting. Oh my gosh. That's what I mean. It's so well done. We know Jerry's tendencies, and it's so, I don't know how many takes that took, but like the way he just spills it and then like he's wiping it with the freaking oven mitt and he's squeezing. It's like, it makes me like gag, but it is so funny. The chicken eating is also disgusting, but I find it more funny than disgusting, which is kind of odd because I'm usually very disgusted by people's mouths. And so whatever, I don't know, somehow this works for me. Lastly, Greg says, one of my best friends and I have said Costanza to each other to the tune of By Menon for 25 years now. It's like how when George had the answering machine message of him singing, believe it or not, George isn't at home. Those earworms work on the characters of the show, but also on me. I know. I mean, that part to me, that little nugget of this episode, the By Menon Costanza. So brilliant. So brilliant. That's really great. I love that. Costanza. I don't really say that. Of all the Seinfeld drops that we do in our house, that hasn't made it, but it is really funny. And I love that between you and your friend. That's very sweet. Thank you so much, Greg, for sharing all your thoughts this week. Now it's time to close Greg's sack. Lunch. On to my favorite Elaine moments. It's that delivery of, it's a kind of sable. I just I'm imagining her face. It just makes me laugh every time. And then a close second would be dial 9 Merlin. Just, of course, she's digging at George while he's just so high on this amazing idea of his leave behind and all that bullshit. It's just a perfect blow line for her to just insult him. It's great. And my final notes for the episode. I like that Elaine gets this plot. She's a bumbling president who doesn't understand that there are consequences to her actions. It's funny. It's another example of Elaine is being treated as an equal here to the men. She can get this pie in the face. She can be an idiot. We don't have to coddle the female character. She makes the same mistakes. And I think it's so funny and it really works. And Ipswich is such a great foe to her in this episode. So many quality scenes, fun interactions. It all feels meaty, to put it in maybe rotisserie chicken terms. Really meaty and juicy. And like I've said before many times in this episode, the more Benestanza, the better. And this episode delivers on that for sure. And I think that's all I can say about the chicken roaster. Please be sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, it's at Elaine Benes Podcast. And if you'd like to email me, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.